Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, taking a break from organizing my shop, which I've been doing for the last week. Traditionally, somehow around Thanksgiving week, I always end up doing a major reorganization, and that's what I've been doing. This week I have to get back to fixing transmissions and whatnot, but I can't say it was fun, but we're making progress. But today, on this beautiful, chilly Sunday morning, sun's out, the winds are calm, I'm out in the shop, going to talk about roll cage tubing benders. To start off, we got to cover the difference between tubing and pipe, because in slang they get used, one for the other, kind of like engine and motor. But in reality, pipe is almost always round, and the dimension is the inside diameter, the ID. And tubing is round, square, rectangle, oval, and the dimension given is the OD, the outside diameter. So when it comes to bending dies and the style of bender, you can see that would make quite a difference. I decided a while ago when I was building a 63 Chevy Nova that I wanted to have a tubing bender of my own. And there's many styles. The two behind me are pretty common, and we're going to go over the good and bad about those, and then eventually at the end of the video we'll talk about the other ones, the other styles. First, let's talk about what you don't want. You don't want the typical Harbor Freight pipe bender where there's one single shoe that goes up in the middle with a bottle jack and there's a roller on either side. Now, people do make those work. They put linings on the rollers to help, curb the deformity that's going to happen. And to a certain point, you could make that work. But I wouldn't recommend it if you're doing something that is ultimately going to protect your life. If you're building a bumper or something like that, that's different. Yes, a bumper protects your life, but you know what I mean. It's not enclosing your whole body and going really fast. There are tubing rollers and kits to convert, like the Harbor Freight tubing roller. You go to Swag Off Road, places like that. And with a tubing roller, you're going to get a long radius. It's important to, while talking benders, the CLR, the centerline radius, is how much curve you're bending the pipe. These two dies here are a 7-inch radius, which looks like this when you're done. It's usable, but it's on the big side, but certainly better than the alternative. In one of the opening photos of this video, I included a picture of my exhaust pipe bender. And if I could bend roll cage tubing with that, which just for kicks yesterday, I sacrificed this piece of EWS, electronic welded seam, 134 thousandths wall tubing. And it was actually going pretty good. If you didn't want a tighter CLR, centerline radius, than a gentle sweep that a roller would give you, you could keep working this around and you could put a bend in the tubing, but just for kicks I went for 90 degrees, and you can see what happened because the exhaust pipe bender has the shoe coming at you this way right in the middle, which doesn't move, and the followers pivot out away from it while the shoe is pushing in the middle. So it works pretty good while the tubing is in the shoe, but once it breaks out of the shoe, you just kink it. So that was done on purpose. I wanted to see what it would be like, and I don't have the right dies. The closest I could get was 1 3/4 inches. And, well, again, it's not what you want, but I wish life would be so much easier because I invested in the exhaust pipe bender. If I could bend roll cage tubing with that, it's so nice. I run it with my knee. It has a indicated degree wheel on it, on the dimension of your bend. It's at waist height. You're standing up doing it. it's a nice rig. And I know people have tried and maybe somebody's perfected it, but today that's out of the scope of what we're talking about. Most people don't have an exhaust bender. I lucked into mine. I don't use it nearly enough, and even when I do bend exhaust pipe with it, there's a drastic difference between a pipe that I bend on the machine and mandrel bends, of course. Same goes for tubing. In all die style tubing benders without support in the middle, a mandrel bender has support on the inside too, and the pipe comes out without any deformity. So what we're looking for in these style benders is as little deformity as possible. Some is always going to happen. Before I continue about deformity, I got to catch you up because I kind of jumped right into it and overlooked a few things. I've been a drag racer my whole life with very little money, but a lot of desire. The first roll cage that I installed in my 70 Chevelle SS 454 that I drove to high school, now it wasn't a nice car. It was a $700 car I bought on a used car lot with no engine and transmission. Actually had a broken Muncie in the trunk. And I found a 70 oval port 454. I put the whole car together, that's great. It wasn't that big a loss when I turned it into a race car. So I like to, talk it up like it is, but it's not anything that was, gonna go across the auction block without a lot of restorative work. So I made it into a race car, and that made me happy at the time. The first cage I put in that, when we back halved it, my buddy and I, he stick welded it in. We had no tools. We're in my unheated garage at my parents' house in the wintertime, and we have probably a Sawzall and the old red Lincoln buzz box. And it actually came out okay for what it was. We weren't going that fast. Thank God nothing ever broke loose and hit me in the side of the head. It was just a 6-point bar. From there, I graduated. I bought myself a MIG welder, a Snap-on YA212, which to this day I still hate because there was not enough heat adjustment and wire speed adjustment. There was only 2 instead of the 3 that I'm used to now. And I thought I was terrible at welding, but turns out, in this case, it was actually the equipment. I digress. I built an entire tube chassis in my same unheated, eventually got a heater, I think, in their parents' garage. And I had no way to manipulate the tubing. I had to just make it fit. They give you some generic bends. At the time, the Alston chassis only sold a small and an intermediate chassis. So I made an intermediate chassis fit a Chevelle. I threw the instructions away and just did it myself. That's where I was back then. I'm actually more of an instruction reader now than I ever was back then. So I was young and I just did my own thing. So again, I had no way to manipulate the tube and never dreamed I would. Nor did I notice how much crush was in it. So getting back to deformity, at any given point, even now, I built several cars. I would buy like a 12-point roll cage kit and some frame rails and just piece it together as best I knew how before I even knew about, buying the SFI paperwork and, what was actually required to do what you want to do, ET-wise. So at any given point, even today, I have most of a roll cage kit kicking around here. I found some main hoops that were on sale for $70 shipped, so I bought 3 different sizes. And if nothing else, it's good tubing, but I am alarmed, this is 134 wall EWS, of the deformity. You can probably even see it on the camera. You can definitely feel it. And this is, a name brand. I won't drag them under the bus, but this is what is acceptable, apparently, in the industry. So, and I knew that before I bought my first bender, which was the gray one behind me, the affordable bender. To this day, I built a whole car plus with it. I bought 2 dies. I bought 1 1/4 and 1 5/8. Drag race roll cages are 1 5/8. Mild steel has to be a minimum of 120, so most people use the 134 EWS. If you use 1/20 thousandths wall DOM, you have to be careful on the outside bend. It doesn't go below the minimum 118 thousandths. So I have a whole video dedicated to the exhaust tubing and requirements, it's easy to head down that road. I'm just talking about bending it at this point. So my affordable bender with my 1.5" die to this day produces a very nice bend with minimal deformity on mild steel. I did this one yesterday, just opposite the kink, and it's nice. And I couldn't go to 90 because this was hitting the follower roller. While I was in the testing mode and sacrificing perfectly good tubing, the other day I had picked up the yellow Speedway bender, which you can see it's a different shape, and I see the affordable benders, the frame is now the same shape as the yellow. I bought that probably 10 years ago, the affordable bender, and I gotta tell you, it's cosmetically, the welds aren't pretty, but it's never failed, and it does a good job. I haven't used a Speedway enough to compare them too much. I did a comparison here I'm just about to get to when I stop flapping my gums, but either one of these does a very adequate job compared to what is commercially acceptable for sure. Up until the other day, I had not bent any chrome moly tubing. Chrome moly tubing, in this case 1.5" is 0.083 wall, so it's much thinner, more susceptible to deformity, crush, ripples, everything. So I bought a bunch. You saw it if you watch the videos religiously. Bought $1,000 worth. It averages out shipped about $12 or $13 a foot. 13, I guess I figured. So this piece that I sacrificed, everything in front of me, is the piece I had left over when I fixed my orange Top Sportsman car when it failed the chassis cert. And it's been laying over there in the corner, so I don't feel quite as bad that I probably ruined in today's market. This is probably $70 or $80 worth of tubing, but I needed to know. Well, let's back up. The other day, excited that I had the new Speedway bender. I'm excited about it, not that it's going to do anything different than the affordable bender can do, but it has a full set of dies. It has 1 inch to 1 3/4, and the popular sizes in between for tubing. And with the affordable bender, I only have 1 1/4 and 1.5", and the die sets are calling $300 a set. Now this style bender has a roller follower. We're going to get to that too, I promise. And they come in a set just like that. But they're pushing, calling $300. Maybe this style's a little bit less. I haven't looked recently, but the dies add up in a hurry. The bender itself is somewhat reasonable. So right off the bat, I put the yellow one up on the bench here. I just clamp it down. What I love about this style bender is it'll store it on the shelf. You just sit here with a bottle jack pumping it. It's right in front of you. You can put it anywhere. It doesn't take a lot of any floor space. It's really handy. And I have been in love with my affordable bender since I got it working with mild steel. I mean, you just couldn't get any better results. So I popped the Speedway up on the bench, put the 1.5" die in it, and immediately make the first bend. I didn't prep the tubing. I didn't use any lube, but now with the affordable bender, I always used white grease. I've used ATF, and I just wanted to try it dry. No, I take it back. I sprayed some 336 CRC, like WD-40. So I did lube it some, and instantly, at the beginning of the bend, I got 3 ripples right off the bat. I only went a little ways to check my progress because I didn't want to smoke 8-9 feet of tubing, which I ended up ruining. And right off the bat, I was a little sad that I had deformity with the Speedway. So I needed to make a dropped cross member. So I got out the old affordable bender, and it does a better job. There's still some deformity, but I didn't clean the tubing. I did nothing. This is an experiment. I want to see what I can get away with. And I made an okay looking cross member. It's difficult to make it match in the middle and everything. And that's okay. And I was perfecting my notching, which I pretty much got down pat. I was in a hurry, and it's too small now. So I have another place I can use it. So this piece isn't totally wasted, but I wasn't so satisfied. I haven't gone any further than this. I wanted to see what the results were. So I had the rest of this tubing kicking around. I said, you know what? Let's put both benders here. Let's follow the instructions, which suggest taking newspaper and soaking it in ATF and putting it between the pipe and the die. So I did just that, and I did one end of this with the affordable bender and one end with the speedway bender, 1 5/8 083 chrome moly. And the bend itself is much better than, again, what's commercially acceptable. And that piece over there was in mild steel. I can only imagine that same machine must really put a dimple in this, because this will actually, it's deformed compared to mild steel with the same die. But it's certainly acceptable. The only way I can tell them apart is the speedway puts two little ripples still right there when it starts its bend, which put me on a fact-finding mission, because I was convinced, like on the Race 55 that was professionally built, I assume they have a much better tubing bender. And every bend on that car, I can reach up and I can feel it sticks through the die this far, typically, to clamp it. I mean, if you put this flush with the die, it doesn't stop bending the first 1.5 inches or so. And when it does, I can feel every bend in that car also has a ripple. So in this case, the affordable bender is definitely on par and slightly better than the speedway, just for that defect it puts in the tubing, chrome moly tubing. On mild steel, neither one of them leave any mark. So they're both excellent for mild steel, and they will do chrome moly and be perfectly acceptable. But is there more out there? So let's close the chapter on this style bender. I forgot to mention, I actually sanded this piece of tubing before I did the side-by-side test, because I wanted to take the mill scale out of the equation. It's pretty popular. Some people buff the whole piece of tubing so it's shiny before they do anything to it. Other people just bend it and then scuff up where they're going to weld, so you don't have mill scale caught in your weld. The affordable bender now in this shape, I do notice that the follower goes down here, just a single support. Your tubing goes through the clamp. On this style bender, this bolt has a lock nut and it's not tight where the clamp is, and that seems to bend without hurting the bolt. On the affordable bender, if you don't tighten this bolt every time, you will destroy that grade 8 bolt. There's a lot of force right there, and this bolt is smaller than the bolt on that one. They both have a similar roller follower, but you'll notice the affordable's above each other for the different size tubing, and the speedway is on an angle. So maybe that difference makes a difference. So what's beyond that? If you study tubing benders, you can buy, let's go beyond what I bought that's not here yet. You can buy one like my exhaust bender. You want to spend $4,000+, you can have a dedicated machine that looks a lot like my exhaust bender, but it bends tubing, roll cage tubing. That is probably out of the scope of anybody but a professional chassis shop, which, by the way, the guy working at your professional chassis shop is really earning his money. He has a lot of expensive tools. This is really hard, frustrating work. So anybody that can even do this for a living, I put on a pedestal, and I only hope my skills are adequate enough to not embarrass myself, while if you take your car to a real chassis shop, the results are typically fantastic. So the next step up from this, from a cost and hopefully performance standpoint, is the JD Squared. I bought a JRM, Woodward Fab, Eastwood. They all sell a very similar bender. It looks like a V. It pivots. And believe it or not, they're actually manual. They're from a powered perspective, they're a step back from this. You have a giant pipe, you have to have it bolted to the floor, and you keep pulling on it, and when you go to a certain spot on the die is very similar to this, but the follower is now a relatively wide shoe with 2 contact points, and you actually lube the shoe and you don't lube the die. And when you're pulling it, you crank it around and there's a series of pins. You have to keep resetting your travel. And it's not as smooth operating as one of these, but I hope, because I bought one, that the results are even better than this. I was not going to buy one. I shopped for used ones, and I only found 2 in my area. One had pipe dies, not tubing dies. So the actual V part, the Woodwood Fab, I forget the part number, is about, in the Eastwood, they're about $400. There's a imported copy of that for like $199. That's just the bender part, no shoe. And the imported one will take the Woodwood Fab dies. I did a lot of research yesterday, almost going the super cheap route. And I wasn't going to buy anything, and then I found a Pro Tools for sale in New Hampshire with 6 sets of dies. It had 2 different CLR centerline radiuses on the 1.25" die, so the guy had 6 dies. He already had converted it with the Swag off-road kit to a air-powered jack, just like the one on my engine crane that I bought at Harbor Freight, which is a popular conversion. So you don't have to use the manual bender. It doesn't have to be hooked to the floor anymore. If you convert it to hydraulic, air over hydraulic, you don't have to chase it around the floor, put holes in your floor, have the things bolted to the floor. You don't have to deal with all that. So it can be somewhat portable. I'm going to make a rig just to put it on my bench here in my receiver hitches like I put my vices in, and I'll be able to store it under the bench. It's slightly more cumbersome than this, but I've actually sold this one, I believe, and that one I'll probably keep around because I have all 5 dies, and I only bought 3 dies with the JRM that I bought. I'm sitting there last night, I'd given up. I wasn't going to go buy the used one because it was more money, or almost the same amount of money as buying a new one, and the guy was pretty firm on the price. And I was talking to a buddy of mine who, it dawned on me that he has a tubing bender. He's had it for 10 years. And he turned me on to the JRM. They're made in California here in America. They're really, he claims it's a great company to work with. And I went ahead and bought one. I ended up spending less money than I would have spent if I drove a 4-hour round trip this morning to go buy the old rusty one out of the guy's storage container. I'm having everything shipped here. So I bought the new bender, JRM, and the JRM dies. I bought 1 inch. And they have many centerline radius options on their dies. So for the 1 inch, I want to continue to make the rest of my drive shaft loop. So I bought a 3-inch CLR. That should be interesting. And I bought a 180-degree die. This style tubing bender only goes 90 degrees. I forgot to mention that. And you can't even quite get the 90 out of it due to spring back. This V style that I have coming, either the dies are 120 degrees, which will definitely get you 90 because you can go beyond and let it pop back. Or, so 120 is the standard, and they also have the 180 degree dies, so you could actually make a loop. So in the 1 inch, I bought the 180 degree die. In the 1.25", I believe I bought a 5-inch centerline, 120 degree die. And an 1 5/8", they offered 5, 6, and 7-inch CLR. 7-inch is what I had, and I can reproduce already. I was worried about the 5-inch centerline radius causing deformity and damage, so I went with the 6-inch, which is what my buddy has. He loves his, has no problem with deformity or anything, so I'm hoping I've done a good thing. But I didn't want to have it manual. I don't want it bolted to the floor. I don't want to pull on a giant pipe. So I bought the Swag Off-Road. They have 2 levels of conversion kits. Well, back up. On the JRM website, I could have bought one that was already hydraulic. It was just under $400 for the manual bender. It was $1,000 for the, instead of being an air over hydraulic engine crane cylinder, it's an actual hydraulic ram with an air over hydraulic pump like I have on that punch right there. So, and I could go that route too, but the popular conversion kits use a Harbor Freight, 8-ton long ram. They're all engineered for that. So I decided to go the swag off road route. So I bought that adapter's $209, and it's specific for the JRM bender. But all these benders pretty much take the same kit. That's how close they are. And I don't know if they all share the same shoes. That's why I didn't go with the cheap Chinese one. One, I felt bad that it's a copy of somebody's hard-earned work. And two, for a little more money, I bought American. So actually twice the money for the bender itself. But the bender I got has a nice, clear indicator gauge with a pointer. And I hope it has enough bells and whistles. And the quality is that much better. Because I'm looking for a quality bend. I don't want a poor, cost-saving decision to make me the same or worse off than I was. Not that I was bad off, but... So I bought the Swag Off-Road adapter kit. And then I didn't read all the swag information. And I had ordered, I think it's a V-Vol, it's an imported cylinder. I didn't want to drive down to Harbor Freight. I didn't know at this point there was a problem with supply chain issues, believe it or not. And Harbor Freight doesn't have any of the cylinders. I had the specific part number because if you go on Swag Off-Road, after I did a little more research this morning, the cylinder has to be 80 millimeters on the OD to work with this clamp arrangement. Again, Swag makes 2 different versions of how they clamp the cylinder. And both have to work with an 80 millimeter OD cylinder. A lot of the air over hydraulic 8-ton rams, there's a lot of different versions out there, are 84 millimeter, and that's not going to work. So, worried about the one I had bought. I opened my email this morning, and they don't have any of those, and they refunded my money. So I was at square one. So, I came out of the garage, and about a year ago, I converted my engine crane with the Harbor Freight cylinder, which happens to be the right part number. It's 80 millimeter OD. So I have one if I need to steal it off my engine crane. But with a little more research on eBay, I found one that's advertised to be 8 centimeters on the OD, which is 80 millimeters. So if the metric system they taught me in the 70s holds true, everything's based on 10, that cylinder should work. Or I can steal the one off my engine crane, put it on the tubing bender, and take the one I bought and put it on my engine crane because the OD doesn't matter on my engine crane. So that's a whole lot of information. I hope I've done a good thing, and I will follow up on how, if at all, it improves my bending experience. Was it a waste of money? I'll let you know. Anytime I work with chromoly, I feel I need to up my skill level because I'm not in my comfort zone, which I guess that's what life's about. Again, back on my refrigerator, there's a picture of a dot. And then out here, it says this is where everything, the good stuff happens. This is your comfort zone. Out here is where the good stuff happens. So you got to get out of your comfort zone. I need to increase my skills. At this point, between buying all the tubing bender and everything else, if this was a one-time deal, which it's not, I would have been better off paying somebody to do this. But that's not my MO. So, and I'll use it again. All the tools. So, hope you're having a great day. Thanks for listening to my rambling. And we'll have to follow up on this, hopefully in a week or so when everything shows up. Once again, I've out-talked my clicker. But have a great day.